So, the UK government is reported to be planning new legislation that would override a part of the withdrawal agreement that it signed to leave the European Union. The context here is that talks over the future trading relationship between the UK and the EU are reaching the sharp end, and there's no deal at the moment. Here's Rob Watson with his analysis of why the UK government's looking at this new law.
It seems to me there may be three reasons for this tactic. Number one is sort of obvious one, to exert maximum pressure on the European Union to do a deal. Two, it may be about domestic consumption. It may be the British government trying to sound really tough before actually eventually giving way, as indeed happened last year with Boris Johnson and the withdrawal agreement. I mean, the third possibility is that the British government actually rather wants a no-deal Brexit.
So this law could impact Northern Ireland, and bear in mind that Northern Ireland became arguably the single biggest issue, the biggest obstacle to the withdrawal deal getting done. The issue was this: the border on the island of Ireland. Northern Ireland's part of the UK. It shares that border with the Republic of Ireland, which is in the European Union. And because of Northern Ireland's violent past and its successful peace process, the status of that border is highly sensitive. Under the withdrawal agreement, Northern Ireland retains some of the EU's customs rules to ensure there's no hard border, no customs checks between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. There would, though, also have to be some checks on goods travelling internally between the UK, between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. In other words, it effectively puts a customs border in the Irish Sea. Now, that was hugely controversial, given that some pro-Brexit politicians had said that wouldn't happen. Well, this new legislation could see the UK remove its obligation to carry out those internal checks, those checks in the Irish Sea. If that happened, we'd come back to the same question everyone's been wrestling with for several years: how to avoid customs checks on the border with the Republic of Ireland, that being something everyone says they do want to avoid. Well, here's Ireland's former Prime Minister, now Trade Minister, Leo Varadkar.
International agreements and international treaties have to be honoured. And they trump any domestic legislation that any country may pass. And that agreement is in place to make sure that we don't see the emergence of a hard border between North and South, something we all want to avoid.
Now, through the day, the UK government sought to downplay the significance of this proposed legislation. It says it's still committed to implementing the withdrawal agreement. Here's the Cabinet Minister, George Eustice, on BBC Radio.
These are important but minor technical details. The principle behind the protocol of checks on some of those goods entering through Northern Ireland ports is in the Northern Ireland Protocol, and we remain committed to it.
At the moment, the UK is in a transition period. It's left the European Union, but it's still following the EU's rules. That transition period finishes at the end of the year. But Boris Johnson says actually the real deadline for a trade deal is October the 15th. Here he is. If we can't agree by then I do not see that there will be a free trade agreement between us, and we should both accept that and move on. What moving on means is effectively a no-deal Brexit, something Boris Johnson has previously said was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance of happening. Here's George Eustice again.
What the Prime Minister is saying, I think, is eminently sensible, which is we all need to know where we stand by the middle of October so that we know what we're planning for. And if we are planning for a Canada-style free trade agreement, the type of agreement we think is eminently possible to achieve and makes sense for both parties, well then let's get that understood by the middle of October. If, on the other hand, there is not going to be a further negotiated agreement and we will be trading with the EU on terms similar to Australia, well, businesses need to know that now so they can really plan for it.
You'd heard there George Eustice mentioning the possibility of trading on terms similar to Australia. Effectively, that means following World Trade Organization rules. Australia and the EU don't have their own free trade agreement. They put tariffs on imports and exports between each other. There's also a difference in scale, though, that we should note. Australia exports about 8% of its goods to the EU, which of course is a decent amount. But last year, the UK exported 46% of its goods to the European Union. The EU is its biggest trading partner. BBC's economics editor, Faisal Islam, picks up on this point in this tweet. The UK exports almost as much in value of cars alone to the EU as Australia exports in total goods and services to the EU. Conversely, Australia doesn't export cars to the EU or anywhere. Well, here's our political reporter, Jessica Parker, in Westminster, on where we go from this point.
As we understand it, and ministers don't really have a lot of time, do they, because they'll need to get this all in place by the end of the transition period, we should see the details of this legislation on Wednesday, and that will be really important because we've had a flavour of what might be in it. So, for example, ministers potentially being able to decide what counts as an at-risk good. That's a good that, say, went from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, but was likely to end up in the European Union and would therefore be subject to European Union tariffs. So those kinds of details hopefully we'll get on Wednesday. I think some critics of the government have suggested that what's happened over the last 24 hours, because not only have we had this emerging that this legislation was coming forward, but also Boris Johnson, as you were mentioning a moment ago, saying, look, if a deal's not in place by mid-October, then let's just move on and just face the facts that we're not going to get one. Some people suggesting this is a bit of sabre rattling by Downing Street ahead of the talks tomorrow. But of course, that can be a risky strategy.
And just one question on the dynamics in Westminster. When we were talking a little way back, Jessica, when Theresa May was trying to get her proposed withdrawal deal through, it was all a numbers game, wasn't it? Because she didn't have the numbers in the House of Commons. Presumably for Boris Johnson, he's got a lot more freedom to go for whatever he wants at the moment.
Yeah, an 80-strong majority. You're absolutely right to talk about this. So I think had something like this been planned in Theresa May's time in terms of some legislation that was causing some contention, then one of the questions we would be discussing tonight is whether Theresa May would even be able to get that through the House of Commons. And that would be a big question. But for Boris Johnson, an 80-strong majority elected, his MPs would argue, on a mandate to get Brexit done. Of course, the UK has actually left the European Union already, but we've been following EU rules since the end of January during the transition period, but really not long now until that transition period is over. We've not talked much about Brexit recently. Obviously, there have been other stories very much in the headlines, but I think as we head towards that October summit, it will be something that's discussed more and more.
Well, the latest round of trade talks between the UK and the EU start tomorrow, Tuesday. Here's the President of the European Commission saying, I trust the British government to implement the withdrawal agreement, an obligation under international law and prerequisite for any future partnership. Protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland is essential to protect peace and stability on the island and the integrity of the single market. Well, here's the BBC's Europe editor, Katja Adler, in Brussels with more of the EU's reaction.
There has been plenty of fuming behind closed EU doors. But yes, in public, EU leaders have been keen not to be seen to be fanning the political flames of the last 24 hours or so. And why is that? Well, basically because they've got their eyes on the prize, that EU-UK trade deal. Negotiations are ongoing. The 8th round of talks starts in London tomorrow, and they don't want to further poison the atmosphere. And so we heard just this afternoon from the French President, Emmanuel Macron. He said he had a really good conversation with the Prime Minister about a number of subjects, including that both men believe it's in both of their interests to get a trade deal agreed as soon as possible. But here, they're not sure that that's going to be possible with the UK. They're saying that the UK will have to make some concessions, and EU diplomats have privately rubbished an assertion by the Prime Minister that he wants a new deadline for the trade deal in mid-October. There's still a belief here that a deal is more likely than no deal, but only just. Those compromises will be needed on both sides, and they'll be politically uncomfortable in the EU and the UK.